All right, here we go again. So in Mexico, there's a game going on. And if we actually begin combat operations, the cartels will increase their operation, but it's not because we're there, it's because the gig is up. The game they're playing is that they keep the intensity of the conflict low enough to say it's a law enforcement action, it's not a military action. So once just because the military is involved, they're not. Those are unlawful enemy combatants in Mexico. Mexico is suffering a revolution. Somewhat of a revolution, somewhat of a civil war, and those people just need to be just done, finished. You don't need to send them to trial. You don't need to do any of that. They're fighting a war, an insurgency. Now, the other trick is there's 3 or 4 different insurgent organizations. So all along, we've been saying that we're fighting the war on drugs, and we weren't. And they're not doing it in Mexico either. We're fighting the law enforcement action on drugs. But we're fighting against military powers, insurgencies. So this idea that it's only a law enforcement, criminal type thing going on in Mexico, it's one of the biggest scams in history. And they fashion the battles a certain way so that the military, doesn't see it. And again, they maybe see it. And again, some of the military action was even corrupt. They were just fighting for one of the cartels. Right? That's probably El Mencho at this point. I guess he's the biggest, right? Right. Well, if you know where El Mencho is for 35 seconds, you put a drone overhead and that's it. No more El Mencho. But again, it's like a failed diplomacy, because then El Fencho comes up, and El Sencho and El Tencho and El Gencho. Right. So the only way to handle it is like an insurgency, right, which is kind of how El Salvador handled it. I still think there was it could have been handled a little bit better, and I'm not sure what all that. Again, the CIA does a lot of things that we generally don't know about. So whoever set up that whole deal with the would-be president of El Salvador back when, that's just standard spy work kind of deal. Right? I'm not going to say CIA was involved, and I'm not going to say they weren't. It's just that's how it's done. You make a deal over here, you make a deal over here, you arrest these people, you kill those people, and then hopefully you have a better country when it's finished. Right. But like I said, I warned all along. I said, make sure your own people aren't running some sort of racketeering operation. Like they become the new MS-13. Right. Like we don't want a Pinochet type thing. Well, yeah, Pinochet was better than what's going on in Mexico, right? Right. I mean, good, bad, and different. Right. Those are governments. Every cartel is or the majority. I mean, there might be a couple of small ones that may not be at the level of government, but most of them are governments, de facto governments. So again, we have all these people coming up here. They don't need to be here. They need a country to live in. And we've spent tons of money starting that country, restarting it. And it won't go because why? Because we're not fighting the war on drugs. I mean, it's affected up here. Dirty cops, their money is drug money and sex trafficking money. Now, how it gets to the cop, I can't tell you that. In some cases, just keep your job. Right. We got the goods on that cop. He went and had sex with a 15-year-old, went and had sex in his cruiser with an adult, whatever it was. All right. I just want to thank the media for broadcasting that there are sting operation after sting operation, with detectives acting like 14-year-olds. Right. because it's needed. That's where the deterrence is. I got hit with it years ago, just in a weird way, right? And I didn't do anything wrong. I went through it, but I read it. I know what's going on. Right. I was contacted by them. Right. I may have contacted somebody that was them, but they just kept trying to contact me and do all sorts of crazy stuff. Right. But I know there's projection, and again, I was under deep state attack, so I know it was a bullshit thing anyway. But I said, well, I'll just go through it, right, and show them I'm not a danger. Right. So I do know that there's a lot to it, that once you're in it, it could shift you into being it, even though you're not it. So it's just the weird part. I can't fully be behind the porn squads because there's corruption. And again, corruption, metaphysical corruption, where you could be a devil in a federal agency or a state agency or a local agency and be on one of those task forces, and you just destroy somebody so they'll become a sex offender. So that's a lot of times why people will not fight it. Fight the machine, because they're like, I don't want me and my family have to undergo that. Next thing I know, my kid will be on drugs and I'll be a sex offender. That's the way most people are, man. They know how it works. Right? They've seen too many people go down. Like, I'm not going down like that. That's real. There's a lot of corruption in that stuff. 100%. Well, what does it is like quotas. There's unofficial quotas. They'll tell you there's no quotas. But any place that has stats and keeps stats, of course they do, that's a quota system. You want to sit there and not have an arrest? Well, this guy's got 3 arrests, that gal's got 4 arrests. Right. So law enforcement investigations definitely has quotas. Right. It's called stats. Right. Well, I'm not into people being shifted and changed just so you can get a stat. But again, the idea of it being some level of deterrence, that's great. So the media is really a lot of stuff coming up in the news about sting operations and things like that. Right. Thank you, Larry. No, I felt their will, everything. Like at first I didn't know what it was. I mean, again, we're all willed to one degree or another. It's just when it goes over a certain line, trying to push you away from healthcare, push you away from healthy things, healthy sexual relations, healthy relationships, whatever it is. Right. And they've done it all. They're sick people, man. They get off on other people failing and them succeeding. Like if they succeeded based upon just corruption, success is not. God kind of really doesn't care too much about that. Because if you're not out there failing other people, what does God care? You're crooked, you'll pay for it if you have to in the end when there's judgment. But if you're on the planet making it uncomfortable, making a mess for other people, that's where God gets involved. Now, I could have had a real healthy life. And I definitely needed to get back to Pennsylvania 5 years ago. I just couldn't get her. And again, that's them. And it's a combination of psychological operation, physical disruption, and psychological operation is also physical, right? And witchcraft and devilry. Well, the cartel money needs to go. I mean, it is the narcotics, but it's more than the narcotics. When you have that much money, and again, then they brought in all these people, right? Like those women all stand. Hashem said to me, he says, "You see those women? Ice out of everything, holding up the signs. He said, every last one of them would do you dirty, like for the cartels, for $1,000. But of course, the cartel will probably pay a little bit more. That every one of those women would set you up and commit felonies against you, including stalking, for $1,000. And they're holding up the sign, ice out of everything, this isn't fair. That's part of what we're collapsing is their organized crime and racketeering thing by getting all the people out of here. Yeah, they built unofficial no-go zones. Right. What do you think's happening to ICE right now? Those are no-go zones, right? Again, when I say ICE, it's funny because it's Border Patrol, FBI, Marshals. So when I put up there about ICE, I'm talking about everybody that's involved in that effort. Right? It even involves me because they affect me like that. Right? I just watch shit crashing all around me. Oh my God, they're magic. See, they're trying to say magic. Their witchcraft is up. Right? When the witchcraft and the devil is up, you can watch. Like, I just got my Amazon and it's damaged. I don't know if it was intentional because they work for Amazon. They have a network of people that work for Amazon, and they'll do your deliveries dirty. Right? Work for FedEx. They work for UPS. They'll do. So again, we have to readjust the country. Right? Well, eventually we can bring people in, but it's under our terms. You come in lawfully, and then you assimilate. We all assimilate. All our families assimilated. It doesn't mean like they're not Jewish and they're not Hispanic and they're not Italian. It means there's a certain part of all this that you have to change. You can't sit in Little Sinaloa in Chicago and do whatever the hell you want, like you're in Sinaloa, right? And that isn't only drug dealing; it's everything else. Right. So assimilation is important. They try to hold, like when I brought it up, they tried to say it's like, it's discrimination or some shit. If you don't assimilate, then what good are you? You're not even supposed to be here. Now, like my mama Mate, she was Romanian. She wasn't going to. I mean, she wasn't that far off from an American culture, but because it was European. But she never did learn the language and stuff like that. But we were there to take care of her. It was part of the deal. We got her over here, and right. It's my Romanian grandmother for my stepfather. So again, there are people again. So let's say somebody can't assimilate and they're here for hardship, amnesty because of something going on. Well, it's fine. We can. But once the system's fixed, right? Once we fix the system to a certain degree, then everything goes back to normal. I told the Biden administration if I gave them ideas on how to get them to work and how to get them different places instead of having them bunch up in one place. Right? There is no right to bust them anywhere or any of that. I'm still against that, unless you're the administration doing it, right? Or working with the administration. Like you make a phone call, I'm going to take 200 up to Chicago. We have jobs for them up there. Yeah, we have a headhunter who's got 150 jobs. Right. That's the only way you do it. You can't just here just go to that nonprofit over there and tell them you want to you need $1,000. They go to 3 different nonprofits and get $3,000, saying that that they're broke and they don't have anything. Right. They owned Aurora Colorado when I got in there. I didn't know who was running the show over there, but all the cops were corrupt. Sheriff's Department was corrupt. Look, the trendy Orega that's running Aurora, Colorado, it's not those young guys. There's some millionaires somewhere living in $1 million homes in Colorado, and they're running Aurora, and they're being covered by all the bosses there, including the law enforcement bosses. Right. In fact, they applied for Trump's $1 million visa or some shit. I mean, that's real, man. You gotta be real. You're gonna fix it. So again, a lot of times just taking out a memento isn't like going to do much. But again, if you had drones in the sky and you had F-16s or whatever it is, it's going to be a different world, and it's not going to be as lucrative and not as much ha-ha. Especially if you take their if you destroy their $20 million villa or whatever it is. Right? So Mexico needed to wage a war, and it didn't. It's still I guess we call them police actions. They are unlawful enemy combatants. I'm just surprised that they don't have real armored vehicles, but they do have armored vehicles. Right. I guess people don't want to go that big. Well, actually, we did arrest some of those people, didn't we? I think some of the Russians got arrested that were talking to cartels, the arms salespeople. Right? Probably trying to buy tanks. Like, but it's kind of how it's run down in Mexico. It's this idea that it's just a drug gang, and I mean, come on. Unlawful enemy combatants, and that's it. So hopefully we can fix that. They deserve up down there in Mexico. If their own government won't give it to them, we'll try to do it for them. Right. Well, I mean, in the United States, China, and Russia. Well, Russia doesn't manufacture as much, I guess, but even Russia at one time had a better economy, I guess. Oops. But the idea is that if Mexico, if Central and South America become larger consumers, legal consumers, not this unlawful crap, where it's a steady consumption from the everyday person because we raise the quality of life, including in Africa and all these other places also, then China and the United States will make more money, and anybody that manufactures will make more money. Right? Vietnam, I guess that's well, the funny thing with Vietnam, I was just in the mine and mine meld this morning. If I didn't hear it the last few days while they were there, nothing picked up. But it did pick up this morning, and the idea is this. If the United States, I tried to explain, I guess it was in Vietnam mine, some of the leaders maybe heard it, I don't know. If the United States had won, where you're at right now would have been like in 1972 or something, 73. Like if that would have just happened. Because the United States, the way the United States used to be, we win and then we recreate that country. And it does marvelous. In Korea, Germany, right. Even the Philippines to a certain degree. Right. I mean, they have some problems, but still it's a country that's doing better than a lot of places. Right. And we do have a relationship back and forth, so that's another thing. The immigration, Filipinos, nurses, and everything else. Right. Japan. So where we are today with Vietnam is, and again, they've been manufactured for a few years now. We would have been in the 70s. We would have tried to build them back up to make them like a Japan, right? Make them like a Korea. Right. So it's just strange, that, for whatever it was, like I said, I'm not going to vouch for what happened. It happened, it's whatever it was, but the end result of the United States winning a war in Vietnam, let's say in 1970 to 72, is by 1976, you would have been where you probably are today with the manufacturing and all that. Right. So, you won, you were into it, but, once the United States got involved, there were other options. Other than, because again, why did Mexico go that way to the cartels? Why did Vietnam go that way? Because of this idea of second-class citizens and all that type of thing, and people being treated poorly, like feudal systems. Right. But once we got involved, we would ensure that the government was more fair at that point. And in war, it's difficult to do, but once the war is over, right. Well, most war governments are either socialist or communist. Right. Yep. It's just the way it is. Until it's over, then you try to install something that works. So I believe where Vietnam is today, they would have been, that came up today. Where they would have been in the 70s had we won. They're fighting their own success. Right. And North Vietnam had a war machine, a pretty good manufacturing war machine, but Could turn that into, we turned all that into real manufacturing back then. Right. I need to go eat something here, I guess. I don't know. Kind of a lazy day. I'm recovering somehow. I'm not in as much pain as I was, which is good. Hopefully it isn't just the weather, which I don't think it is. They were doing all sorts of shit to me. Right. Because I mean, I was in cold area. I was in Albuquerque, not Albuquerque. What's that place? Lubbock, Amarillo. I was in Amarillo. I was in Colorado. Right. No, yeah, the winters in Colorado are probably even more so than they are here. So never got well till I got back here, and then I've been receiving some therapy. The doctors really let me down there. I didn't articulate the right issue. Right, I've been back to doctors like I was. I'll probably at some point go back and get a couple more steroid shots, but I'm gonna let it rest for a little while. And that's what was needed. It's just, again, when they're there operating and cursing you, they were trying to get me to kill myself. I mean, they're just nuts. I mean, there's a bounty on my head. Been a bounty on my head for probably 30 years. Yeah. Talk about, I think there's bigger bounty on my head than Bavino's, actually. I'd hate to tell you that, but I haven't heard one even close to what the one on me is. Right. Well, because I spoke out. That's why it's, probably not prudent to try to do anything to me, really. But again, if you get a couple cops to guarantee you that nobody will investigate it and they'll handle it, right. Why would we do it? Because you're criminals. You're in an organized crime entity. Even if you call it the police department or the investigative firm or whatever it is. You're the ones that have to pay for it in the afterlife. Like, I never knew how important the afterlife was. Until I, woke up, and then I was like, okay, and then I figured out how bad it is for them. I even said from the beginning, I said the worst thing you could be is a wealthy person doing well on this planet and actually be a devil. Because you're increasing your punishment on it, just continuing on, right? Well, stay peaceful. Praise God in all that you do. Praise God.